Miss Williams, we just appreciate you so much taking out the time to talk with us today about the pandemic influenza that was in 1918. I understand that you were actually living here in Selma, Dallas County, and your immediate family was affected by it. Can you just tell us a little bit about how it did affect your family?
Well, you know that I've reached my 91st birthday, but there are some remembrances that I do have, and that is one of the outstanding traumatic experiences that I've had in my lifetime. Because my father, who was a jeweler, was taken ill and was very ill, and we didn't know whether he was going to live or not. And it's a wonder that we all did not take it. But there were two girls, my sister and myself, and my mother, and she waited on him. And I was 3 years old, but I can very readily remember and very clearly remember that he was so sick and we were afraid that we were going to lose him. And I remember it snowed that year, and he got out of the bed and went in the backyard to try to find a diamond ring that Mother had lost. And we all were absolutely scared to death. You know, it was going to kill him. But he must have been a very staunch, steady individual and with a good health record, because he never was in the hospital until when he died. And, you know, it was pretty representative of the town, because there were so many people who were ill and out, as well as I can remember. Now, I can't say definitively, but as well as I remember, they had to close some of the places. My father worked at Baywig Jewelry Company. And no, it wasn't. It was Hobbs and McGill. When he first came here, he worked for an old firm called Hobbs and McGill. And there were so many people who were out with the flu that they had to close up some of the stores. And as well as I remember, that was one of them. The doctors would come to the house and they would see their patients. And some of them they took to the hospital. But do you realize that at that time they had no treatment that I can remember for flu at all? They had no pharmacy help, you know, pharmaceuticals, and all they could do was just nurse them and try to feed them and bathe them and keep them clean and let them rest. And it was really a very, very sad situation. So many people died, and I remember that they did, but I don't remember the number. I have no way. That would have to be researched from some material that possibly you have and would be interesting.
You said the physician came and saw your father.
Oh, yes, they made house calls up until even my husband, after he had his heart attack in 1962 and went back to work 6 months later, he still made house calls. And that's the last of them that I remember.
Your father was affected by the flu of 1918. Do you recall any of the symptoms that he had?
Oh, yes, fever, headaches, aching. And that's about as much as I can remember because I was so small. But I remember he was really sick.
You said that your mother was the primary caregiver of your father. What all did she do for him during this illness?
My mother took care of him and kept us away from him and as much as she could, and fed the family as she did throughout her life.
Were your neighbors able to help each other out? Did they pull together during this time to try to care for the people that didn't have anyone to take care of them? Did they bring food and other items to you?
Yes, some of the neighbors had it, and of course in this community, when someone is sick or in trouble, the neighbors just came to our help and brought in food. They didn't come in. They would just come in to the door.
And just leave it at the door?
Oh, let Mother take it from the door.
Do you recall how long your father was ill, how long that illness actually lasted, and do you recall that it came back?
No, Ann, I don't, but I remember that it was a long, drawn-out illness because there was no medication. There was nothing. He did recover, and I do not recall it having returned. You know, at that time, I don't know, I might be wrong, you can look it up, but I don't think the word viral had been discovered.
Maybe not.
There was a pneumococcal and a bacterial, pneumococcal is bacterial, pneumonia.
The other thing that was mentioned, I've heard a little bit about that, some people were given aspirin. You don't recall that?
Well, I'm sure that's all they had. That was all they had. and I'm sure they gave them that to try to control the temperature.
Because he had a very high fever.
Yes, the fevers ran high with that. They can't possibly understand or even visualize the impact that it had on the entire society.
How were the businesses in the community affected? Do you recall that they were closed? Were people able to go to work?
Well as I recall, some of them had to close up because they didn't have the personnel to operate, and people were afraid to go to town. I mean, we were more or less confined to the house, and should have been. I don't mean that it was a legal imposition, but I think we just did it almost voluntarily because it was, you didn't want to get out. Exactly. And our mothers and fathers who were not ill, of course, my father was, but they just did not turn us loose to roam the neighborhood.
What would you suggest for people today if this were to happen again? What would your advice be? Since you have actually experienced this, what would help us if this were to return?
Well, number one, get to your doctor as soon as you can, because they do have things today they did not have in 1918. Go to your doctor, get your medicine, go home, be sure you got plenty of food, and stay there. And if you have to have a doctor, then call your doctor and let him get you to the hospital.
Is there anything else you can think of or want to summarize or say about it, Miss Williams?
Nothing, except it was about the most traumatic experience that I've had in my life, except what I'm going through right now.